Welcome back to the Lukin Center YouTube channel. As always, my name is Dr. Konstantin Lukin, and today we have a special guest, Neer, who is one of our senior clinicians here at the practice. And today we're going to talk about sports psychology, or I'd like to really think of it as psychology in sports, because I think it's a little bit more apropos. What are your thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, psychology plays a role in sports, so to think of it as, something that's sports psychology, it's really just something that is a little nuance there. So
Sure.
More so the factors of psychology and how they play a role in sports.
For sure. So if you would have to distill, obviously the field of psychology is so vast, right? There's just so many different things people talk about. If you would have to distill or think about, 2 or 3 things that really stand out to you as a clinician who focuses working with athletes, are there particular pillars, are there particular ideas that really stand out? So for some of our viewers, be it they're an athlete or an athlete in training or somebody thinking about being an athlete, certain just principles that you like to think about or that you like to implement when you're working with athletes?
Definitely. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is mindfulness.
Sure.
Mindfulness is something that's very hot in psychology and counseling these days.
For sure.
And it certainly plays a role in sports as well. Oftentimes, you're in your own head, you make a mistake, and you might be thinking the rest of the game about that mistake. So to bring yourself back, to bring yourself into the moment, really can be extremely beneficial to just be ready for what's to come. Much like life, if you're ruminating and thinking about mistakes that you've made, it makes it very difficult to really get quality out of what you're doing in the moment.
So can I ask, I'm just imagining, I'm not an athlete myself, but I do a good amount of sports. I'm wondering, how do you apply it, let's say in a game? To your point, somebody missed a shot, somebody missed a goal, couldn't get that interception that they really wanted, or how did they bounce back? Because I could totally imagine the next play starts, right, and the person is still involved in that other missed opportunity.
Sure.
Is there something specific? Because the game is going, the game is moving, so you don't have the ability like in life. Maybe if you need to, you could go outside, take a little breather, count to 5, whatever it is that you need. Once it's going and it's obviously live, are there any particular things that stand to mind when you're thinking about mindfulness to apply in those instances?
Absolutely. 2 go-tos that I really like to talk about. One, I'll recommend someone wear a rubber band.
Okay.
It's easily accessible, the game's still going.
Right.
To pull it and really just think about bouncing back.
Okay.
It sort of is just a metaphor to be able to recognize that, hey, what happened, let's be in the present moment. Some sports, you do have a little bit more time between plays, between, maybe there are substitutions, whatever the case may be. If you get that opportunity, I like to use a skill called 3-2-1. 3 things that you could see in the moment, 2 things that you can hear in the moment, 1 thing that you can feel, and really think about the texture and how it feels in your hands. That really is a valuable skill to bring yourself back to the moment. So I know that one takes a little bit longer, but the rubber band, if you're a little bit, pressed for time in your sport, and 3-2-1 if you get a moment.
That's a really good point. You caught me right-handed. I used to be a soccer player, so I thought there is no time off. You're always on the field for the 45 whatever plus minutes. But you're right. In other sports, you do have a breather. You have time. You have a break. You have whatever the case may be.
Sure.
Okay. So those are the 2 kind of pillars that you bring into the therapy session, let's say, to help an athlete to kind of try to move forward and be able to move away from some of the errors that they've made before. Are there any cognitive strategies? Because I'm just thinking of a viewer thinking, okay, that's cool, so I could be a little bit more mindful. Let me think about how to move forward from there. Any cognitive strategies that you typically use, or maybe another way of saying looking at an error in a different way that helps the person move forward?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because this is some work that I can do in session with someone. Ultimately, when we make an error, let's say we're going with baseball. I played baseball, so that's easy for me to talk about. If you make an error, you might say something to yourself like, I'm a bad fielder. Or making it really about yourself as a whole. So I would encourage this switch to more practical, accurate language, saying something like, I messed up that play. So it doesn't become about you as a whole, it just becomes about that one singular moment, because athletes of all abilities, some of the best professional athletes, they make mistakes. We've seen it happen.
Well, Shaq, right? Like with the free throw.
Oh yeah, I mean his free throw percentage. I mean,
right.
probably better than mine. I don't want to, say anything bad about Shaq, but absolutely, that's something really is worked on in session a lot. Just practicing using more accurate language, because a lot of times athletes, they really take on being an athlete as their total identity.
Right.
And once that happens, you can get into a little bit of trouble, because if you make a mistake, now you're thinking of yourself poorly as a person rather than just the mistake that you made on the field or the court or what have you.
For sure. Huh. Yeah. I mean that really comes to mind, especially with some of those, we're here in northern New Jersey. There's a lot of competitive towns here in terms of sports.
Certainly.
And there's a lot of adolescents, maybe middle school, high school, maybe even college, where, to your point, that person's whole identity
For sure.
becomes the sport, because probably they're pretty good at it, right? And they're using that as maybe even a self-esteem booster, right? And I guess I'm wondering, to your point, there seems to be like this fine line between complete identity, right, and the emotional investment that goes into it, but also, to your point, then if you make mistakes, it's not that you're making a mistake, it's that your self-esteem takes a hit, right? So I'm wondering, like, is there, I hate to use this word, there's no like prescription or math, but I guess I'm wondering, like, how do you navigate that? Because to me, it could be dangerous to say, like, well, don't take it so seriously, it's not that important. Yeah, but then doesn't the performance suffer? Because if I'm not fully invested, then I would imagine one's performance begins to suffer if they have something else that they're beginning to focus on.
It's very tricky, and you're right, there is no exact prescription of it, but I like to think of it kind of like sleep. When you really think, I want to sleep really well, I want to, make sure I get a good night's sleep, the more you're in your head about it, I don't know anyone who's done that and then gotten a good night's sleep. It just doesn't happen. It's something that's a very natural process. So it has to matter to you. You have to be willing to put in the work, put in the practice. But then once you get out on the field or the court, it just is a natural thing. It's something that has to sort of just happen. So if you put in that preparation and if you put in all the hours, once you get on the field, you have to find a way to just bring yourself to the moment, read and react, and then whatever happens, just recognize that that's just what happened that day.
That's such a great analogy, because my mind went, in a way, from a sleep point of view, right? Everybody talks about this, the magical 7 to 8 hours, right? Because you don't perform really well if you sleep like 4 to 5 hours, right? Let's say you're completely not practicing. But also, if you're in bed for 12 to 14 hours, that's not healthy either.
Definitely.
So I kind of like that analogy that you're bringing up, because it's probably very true to your kind of identification to the sport. Too little is probably not good, but too much isn't really good either, because then you're beginning to, like, you make mistakes, it's harder on your self-concept and harder on your performance. So finding that balance, it seems to me, to your point, is such a critical way to just be the best version of yourself on the field and off the field.
Quality and consistency are the two things that are really most important. And after you have that down, if you want to build on volume of more practice, more sleep, as long as it's not taking away from other areas of your life and impacting your mental health, and now this becomes my identity again. I am a football player versus, no, I'm Steve and I have a family and I have a role to play in my relationships. That's really what we're looking at.
Okay, well, I'm glad sort of our conversation kind of navigated there, because I think it's so important, because for some of the viewers, like, I am a tennis player, I'm a soccer player, I'm a football player. Being able to try to focus, finding that balance, I think it's so important, so critical to overall success. Any kind of words of wisdom that you want to leave our viewer with, just something to take away that they can, I possibly can start applying it in my daily life?
Definitely. I mean, practicing mindfulness, using that 3-2-1 skill, if you just use it more regularly in your life, it can become more accessible and something you can think about. And then also, I really encourage journaling as a great tactic as well that can work on that cognitive side of it that you had mentioned, where, in therapy, obviously, we're working on how to be able to be more accurate with our words. That's something you could do on your own time in a journal. I think people think of journaling as something that they're writing out all their problems all day long, their feelings on things, and certainly it can be a part of that, but to just make it more quality based,
Right.
just identifying the language that you're using when you make a mistake, and then finding a way to make it more accurate, more specific versus generalizing it to yourself as a whole. That would be really a great takeaway, I think.
Awesome. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for stopping by, and thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.